And I now give the floor to Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, Executive Director of UN Women.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a common message, there is a common message coming from women affected by conflict and actors who are concerned with women, peace and security matters. Whether it is women in Afghanistan, Libya, Sudan, Burundi, the Philippines, DRC, Yemen, Colombia, Kurdish and Yazidi women, whether it is the youth who are here for this week and the global focal points on women, peace and security from different countries, whether it is women peacekeepers like the ones from South Africa who shared their touching stories with us yesterday, highlighting the needs to increase the numbers of women in uniform, the loud and common message is progress is too slow, political will is not strong enough, and pushback against the needs and interests of women is threatening the progress we have made and pushing those who need the resolve and the support most further away. This is despite many good words, agreements, discussions, and events. Change is not as real as it needs to be. As I address the Council today, I urge that we heed the call of these women. As we discuss the report of the Secretary General, we must aim to close the gap between words and action as it's been already articulated by the Secretary General. The collective scorecard is not where it should be, even though we agree on so much. There is a stark contrast between the expressed support from member states and regional and international organizations to women, peace and security and the reality. The correlation between gender inequality and a society propensity for civil interstate conflict is now well established. The link between participation of women and more durable peace has also been established. And yet, we still live in a world that tolerates and excuses women's continued exclusion from peace and political processes and institutions. We still live with violent misogyny that is on the rise. We're witnessing record levels in political violence targeting women. Sexual violence continues to be used as a weapon of war and terror, while its survivors are left without justice or support. And the support they need is minimized sometimes by decisions that we take even here. After conflict, economic recovery for women is primarily limited to microcredit and microenterprises, while large-scale reconstruction is dominated by men and overwhelmingly benefit men. Feminist organizations repeat calls for disarmament and arms control and shifting military spending to social investment. Still, these calls have gone unanswered. It seems easier to use arms than to deliver clean water, energy, or heal the women in northeast Nigeria from the recurring trauma as observed my ASG Asaregna last week. The list of examples of people who should be benefiting from this resolution who are not benefiting is just way too long. Last year, the Secretary General tasked UN Women with commissioning an independent assessment of progress in implementing the gender-related recommendations of the 3 peace and security reviews that the UN conducted in 2015. Its findings are summarized in the SG's report. Of the recommendations that targeted the UN specifically, we found that 50% of the recommendations have been implemented or are in progress. That 10% had either gone backward or were not progressing at all. From 1990 to 2018, less than 20% of peace agreement included provisions addressing women or gender. And last year, none of the agreements reached in UN-led processes included provisions addressing women. The UN-led process are also supported by member states. So together, we have a responsibility to do better than this. Many of the countries that will speak here today generously support mediation and peace negotiation efforts. But we need also for all these countries to advocate for the full deployment and use of these women who have tremendous skill and commitment to the agenda. We need you to demand women's direct and meaningful participation in peace talks in all phases. Women's absence from peace tables is still commonplace, but it does no longer go unnoticed. Partners who support peace talks also do not include women or have limited women that represent them. As we speak, and it is not out of lack of trying on our part, in all ongoing peace process, fewer than 8% of agreements contain gender-related provisions, down from 39% in 2019. In recent past, where agreements do include specific gender provisions, ensuring implementation has also remained a challenge. The 2016 Peace Accord in Colombia is a landmark agreement, and great effort went into putting together that agreement. But a recent analysis shows that around half of the gender-related provisions in that agreement have not been initiated, and that gender provisions are being implemented at even slower rates than the rest. I have some promising news because it is not nice to give a report like this, I have to say. The independent assessment did identify areas of progress that are underway, such as the stronger integration of gender consideration in preventing violent extremism. We do, however, still face challenge where national counterterrorism legislation often impact negatively on women's civil society organizations, and report urges member states to review them and to take action. UN Women has just supported 2 research projects conducted by Monash University in 4 countries: Indonesia, the Philippines, Bangladesh, and Libya. In all 4, hostile sexist attitude towards women were the factors most strongly associated with the support for violent extremism, far more than age, degrees of religiosity, level of education, or employment. This is a significant finding, especially because the vast majority of studies on terrorism ignore gender. We appreciate the strong collaboration with the agencies that are working in this area and the member states that collaborate with us. The number of countries that have adopted national plans also increased by 50% in 2015. We welcome and applaud these countries. But still, that represents less than half of the countries in the world, and only 22% of all plans include a budget at adoption. We urge the countries with the new plans to make sure that they include budgets. Excellencies, women's economic empowerment is key to sustaining peace. Women need to be given priority in efforts to respond to crisis and plan for peace. Without shelter, food, support for educational and health needs, women's life continues to be frozen in a low-intensity warfare. Discrimination against women and access to assets and productive resources violate women's human rights and leave them vulnerable to extreme poverty, gender-based violence, and trafficking in all countries. Family members also are at risk of being drawn into terrorism and being on harm's way. The marginalization of women in decision-making and the political economy of foreign aid, reconstruction and economic revitalization is part of the problem that you can solve, and together we can move the needle. In fragile and conflict-affected countries, only 4 in 10 women are in paid work, compared with 7 in 10 men. Creating work opportunities for women is therefore an important contribution. In countries experiencing prolonged crises like Afghanistan, Syria, or Yemen, the gender employment gap is 50 or 60 points. In contrast, 2016 to 2017, only 0.2% of total bilateral aid to fragile and conflict-affected situations went directly to women's organizations. Investing directly in women is also critical. In 2018, total world military expenditure reached $1.8 trillion. Some of its deepening crisis in the same fragile countries that we are meant to be helping through 1325. It is important to state that the overall share of aid promoting gender equality in some form has increased to 42.6%, higher than ever before, but less than 5% of it goes to programs with primary objective to improve gender equality and women's empowerment. This support comes from a small group of countries which we can really expand. In the UN to date, only a few entities have committed to achieving minimum targets on allocation and expenditure on gender equality. The Peace Building Fund remains the bright spot thanks to the consistent championing by senior leadership and the collaborative effort which we can all learn from. The Secretary General's 29 Women, Peace and Security Report urges that next year, UN entities have to benchmark targets and put in place accountability mechanism. Your active support in this direction to support this call would go a long way to help. I further ask that you address the issue of participation and inclusion of women in all peace processes, as well as the inclusion of women in uniform services. This is one of the important components of the Resolution 1325, and you can also do more to help us enforce and implement this. As I said last year, the UN and member states should not be giving support to peace processes that exclude women, because if you take a stand on this, things will change. We know that such processes have limited chance of bringing durable peace. It is therefore important that you intervene decisively. Choosing to exclude women and choosing to, therefore, means that we may be choosing to compromise our collective desire for lasting peace. Tomorrow, most of you will be at the Global Forum for Survivors of Conflict-Related Violence. This is led by Nobel laureates Denis Mukwege, Nadia Moradia, and my colleague Pramila Patten, the Special Representative of the Secretary General. Thanks to many efforts of the last decade, this is no longer history's greatest silence. We know women are not just victims. They continue to lead and stand up even after torrid experience. Nadia is a living testimony of the resilience of women who defy all odds. And I applaud a contribution that has been made in partnership with OHCHR and the ISIS in implementing the Justice Rapid Response and others that ensures that there is thorough investigation of crimes and that these crimes are also documented. And I want to make sure that as we move forward and as we prepare for the 20th celebration next year, we can close some of the gaps that we can close within the year ahead of us. You will be listening for a few minutes, in a few minutes now, to women's voices and stories. Ala Salah from Sudan, one of the many women that are leading the change in her country, because these represent the young women of courage. You will listen to Congolese women describing the political representation barriers they were facing in the lead up to the country's first election in 2011. You will also be listening to South Sudanese women. You have also listened in the past to Afghan, Libyan, and Yemeni women demanding respect for women's rights and meaningful participation of the women in negotiations and decisions that will determine the future of their countries. And on International Women's Day, just a few months ago, Angelina Nyajima Simone Jael, one of the members of the South Sudan Women's Coalition, told you that we need not just to be consulted, but to be heard. When we raise concerns about tensions mounting on the needs for services, we speak from an informed position. There is a lot of trust and expectations on this council, and I hope we will be able to rise to the occasion. Between now and 2020 October, on the 20th anniversary of the 1325 resolution, let's take big steps to close the gap. That is what women are asking us to do. There's a lot we can do even in this year. Your action can move the needle and be the examples of political courage, not just the courage of the people who have less to give, who have much less to give, and much more to lose. All of us and together can take action. Thank you.